The bitter words coiled in his throat, a venom I could feel through the charged air between us. I, Prince Kael of the Silver Moon Pack, hereby reject you, he began, his voice a low thunder that silenced the thousands of shifters gathered in the great hall. His hand, warm and calloused, lifted to my shoulder, the final touch that would sever a bond I never asked for, a bond the moon goddess had mistakenly proposed. He was an alpha of alphas, power radiating from him in waves that made my human bones ache. I was Elara, the orphan, the magicless stray the oracle had forced upon his royal family. His silver eyes, cold as the winter moon, held no pity, only a chilling resolve. He was my doom, the man the oracle had warned me about my entire life, and in this moment, under the weight of his entire world's gaze, he was going to break me. But the instant his fingers made contact with my skin, a searing white fire erupted from the point of contact. A symbol, intricate and ancient, blazed into life on my shoulder, a mirror image of it burning itself onto his hand. A gasp tore through the hall like a physical wave. Kael snatched his hand back as if bitten, staring at the glowing brand on his palm, then at me, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The rejection was broken. In its place, destiny had branded us, binding his soul to mine with an unbreakable, agonizing magic. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. The silence that followed was a living thing, a predator stalking the cavernous hall. It was heavier than the scent of pine and damp earth that clung to the shifters, more profound than the flickering torchlight that cast long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the sudden void of sound. Kael's eyes, which seconds ago had been filled with cold disdain, now swirled with a storm of confusion, fury, and something else I couldn't name, a flicker of fear. His father, King Theron, rose from his throne on the dais. He was a formidable presence, his frame massive even in his human form, his gray-streaked hair and beard giving him the look of a mountain that had weathered 1,000 winters. His gaze wasn't on me, but on the glowing mark on his son's hand, which was slowly fading to a stark silver scar that looked like a constellation of a wolf and a woman intertwined. "What is the meaning of this?" the king's voice boomed, shattering the stillness. It wasn't a question directed at me, but at the universe itself. No one answered. The pack elders seated to the king's left murmured amongst themselves, their faces etched with concern and awe. They were the keepers of lore, the historians of their kind, and yet the symbol that now marked both me and their future alpha was clearly unknown to them. I felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on me, judging, questioning, accusing. I was the anomaly, the human wrench thrown into the perfect, powerful machine of their shifter society. They had tolerated my presence in the territory on the Oracle's command, a strange prophecy that had brought me from the human world to their doorstep 5 years ago. I was the girl who was supposed to be tested and, if found worthy, mated to the prince. But I was never meant to be worthy. The rejection was a foregone conclusion, a mere formality to appease a senile mystic before I was sent back to a life of obscurity. "It is a binding mark," a frail voice cut through the nervous energy. All heads turned toward the shadowed archway at the side of the hall. The oracle emerged, her form stooped with age, her face a roadmap of wrinkles. Her eyes, however, were ageless, a startling milky blue that seemed to see through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. She was the one who had found me, the one who had warned me. Never love a shifter, Ilara. Their world will devour you. Their passion will burn you to ash. She leaned heavily on a gnarled staff, her gaze fixed on Kael and me. The goddess does not make mistakes, King Theron. She has not proposed a mating, she has commanded one. The bond is sealed. Kael finally broke his shocked paralysis. He turned on the oracle, his body vibrating with a barely contained rage. His wolf was close to the surface, a primal energy that made the air crackle. Sealed? I reject it. I will not be shackled to a human. She has no wolf, no strength, no place here. His words were barbs, each one finding its mark in my already fractured spirit. I shrank back, wrapping my arms around myself. He was right. I was nothing. I had no family, no pack, no inner beast that gave these people their strength and pride. I was just Ilara, a girl who saw things others didn't, flickers of light around people, echoes of emotions left behind in empty rooms. It was a useless, strange little quirk that had only ever served to isolate me. Your will is irrelevant in this, young prince, the oracle said, her voice soft but unyielding. The magic that binds you is older than the packs, older than the first alpha. To fight it is to invite ruin upon us all. King Theron descended the steps of the dais, his heavy boots echoing on the stone. He stopped before us, his immense shadow falling over me. He looked from his son's furious face to my terrified one, his jaw tight. He was a king first and a father second. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options, the search for a path that would preserve his power and the stability of his pack. An alpha prince bound to a human was a political disaster. It was a sign of weakness, a crack in the foundation of their dynasty that rival packs would be all too eager to exploit. The ceremony is concluded, the king announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. He turned to the stunned crowd. Tonight, we celebrate the will of the goddess. He raised a hand, and after a hesitant beat, a smattering of applause and confused cheers rose from the assembly. It was a performance, and they were all being forced to play their parts. He then lowered his voice, speaking only to Kael and me. You will both come with me. Now. The walk to the king's private study was the longest of my life. I was flanked by 2 royal guards, their presence a clear message that I was not a guest, but a prisoner. Kael stalked ahead of us, his back rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. I could feel his anger as if it were my own, a hot, churning sea of resentment that pulsed through the new, unwelcome connection between us. It was a nauseating sensation, an invasion of my innermost self. The king's study was a room of dark wood, worn leather, and the smell of old books. A fire crackled in a large stone hearth, casting a warm glow that did nothing to dispel the icy tension in the room. King Theron poured himself a goblet of deep red wine and downed it in one go before turning to face us. "Explain this, Kael," he commanded. "Explain it?" Kael laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "I did what was expected of me. I rejected the human. It was this thing," he spat, gesturing vaguely between us, "this magic that interfered." "She is not a thing," the oracle said calmly, having followed us into the room. "She is your mate, and you would do well to remember that." "She is my curse," Kael roared, slamming his fist on the heavy oak desk. The force of the blow splintered the wood. He was losing control, the powerful alpha wolf within him chafing at the metaphysical chains that now bound him. My own fear was a cold knot in my stomach. I wanted to disappear, to run back to the human world where the most dangerous thing I had to face was an overdue bill, not an enraged shifter prince who looked at me as if I were something he'd scraped off his boot. Enough. The king's command was absolute, imbued with an alpha authority that even his son could not defy. Kale subsided, his chest heaving, his silver eyes still blazing with fury. The king paced the room, his mind clearly racing. The oracle is right about one thing. This magic is ancient, unprecedented. We cannot show weakness or division. The other packs are watching. The Shadow Claws, the Timberfall, they will see this as an opportunity to challenge our dominance. He stopped and looked at Kale, his expression grim. You will accept this, publicly. You will treat Ilara as your chosen mate. We will present this as a sign of the goddess's ultimate favor, a new kind of union that will strengthen our pack. Strengthen us with a human? Kale scoffed. She will be a liability, a target. Our enemies will tear her apart, and I will be tethered to her when they do. The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. He wasn't wrong. I was defenseless in this world of predators. Then you will protect her, the king stated simply. She is your responsibility now. She will be moved into the royal wing. She will be trained, taught our ways, and you will be at her side. You will learn the nature of this bond, and you will learn to control it. Is that understood? It was not a request. Kale's jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth would crack, but he gave a stiff, jerky nod. Understood. My own voice was a whisper. I don't want this. I don't want to be here. The king's gaze fell upon me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something other than royal pragmatism. It might have been pity. You no longer have a choice, child. None of us do. Destiny has made its move. We must now play the game. That night, I was moved from my small, simple room in the communal house to a lavish suite of chambers in the palace's royal wing. The bed was larger than my entire previous room, draped in silks and furs. A balcony overlooked the moonlit valley, the vast forest stretching out like a dark sea. It was a gilded cage, and the bars felt as cold and hard as any iron. I stood before the large, ornate mirror, my reflection a pale, frightened stranger. I pulled down the collar of the simple dress I wore, and there it was, the mark. It was no longer glowing, but had settled into a delicate, silvery tattoo on my skin, a swirl of lines that was both beautiful and terrifying. My brand. My shackle. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and it was not my own. It was a dizzying, vertiginous feeling of rage and helplessness, so potent it made me stumble. I gripped the edge of the dresser to steady myself. Kale. I could feel him, somewhere else in the castle, pacing his own cage, his emotions bleeding into mine. The bond was a two-way street, a bridge between our souls that neither of us knew how to cross, let alone dismantle. Tears welled in my eyes. The oracle's warning echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain. Never love a shifter. She hadn't warned me against them hating me. She had warned me against loving them. The irony was a bitter pill. How could I ever love a man who looked at me with such utter contempt? A man who was bound to me not by choice or affection, but by a cruel twist of fate. My dilemma was no longer just about survival. It was about preserving what little was left of myself. How could I keep my own heart, my own mind, my own soul, when another's was now irrevocably tangled with it? I was bound to the Alpha Prince, a man who despised me, in a world that could crush me. And as I stared at my own haunted reflection, I knew that the rejection ceremony hadn't been the end of my ordeal. It was only the beginning. The days that followed blurred into a monotonous cycle of gilded imprisonment and icy hostility. I was a ghost in the royal palace, drifting through opulent halls where servants would lower their eyes and whisper as I passed. The pack members I encountered in the corridors would either offer a stiff, formal bow filled with suspicion or glare at me with open resentment. To them, I was the human usurper, the weak link who had somehow ensnared their prized prince. Kale was a master of avoidance. He ensured our paths never crossed, except when absolutely necessary for public appearances. At these times, he would play the part his father demanded. He would stand at my side, a perfect picture of a protective mate, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. But his touch was cold, his body a wall of tense muscle. The moment we were out of public view, he would drop his hand as if burned and stalk away without a word. The bond, however, was a relentless jailer. It cared nothing for his avoidance. I felt him constantly, a low hum of anger and frustration at the edge of my consciousness. At night, his turbulent emotions would seep into my dreams, leaving me exhausted and disoriented when I woke. I felt his fierce loyalty to his pack, a feeling so profound it was like a physical ache. I felt the weight of the crown he was destined to wear, a crushing pressure that he bore with a grudging grace. And underneath it all, I felt the wild, untamed spirit of his wolf, a magnificent, powerful creature pacing the cage of his skin, yearning for a freedom he felt I had stolen. My training began. It consisted of long, tedious lessons with an elderly elder named Lorna on pack history, laws, and etiquette. I learned about alpha bloodlines, mating rituals, and the intricate politics of the shifter world. It was all a farce. I was being taught how to behave like a Luna, the female leader of the pack, a role I could never truly fill. A Luna needed a wolf. She needed to be able to run with the pack, to feel the hunt in her blood, to command respect through her own innate strength. All I could do was sit politely and memorize facts. The most constant thorn in my side was Lyra. She was the daughter of the king's beta, the second in command, and an alpha female in her own right. She was beautiful, with fiery red hair and emerald eyes that held a predatory gleam. It was an open secret that she and Kale had been close, that everyone had expected her to be his chosen mate before the Oracle had intervened and brought me into the picture. Her hatred for me was a palpable force. She found me one afternoon in the palace library, where I had sought refuge amongst the towering shelves of ancient books. I was tracing a finger over the faded spine of a tome on shifter mythology when her voice, dripping with saccharine condescension, cut through the silence. "Well, well, look what we have here, the little human playing at being a scholar." I turned. Lyra was leaning against a bookshelf, flanked by two other she-wolves, who looked at me with matching sneers. She was dressed in leather training gear, her body lithe and powerful. "I was just reading, Lyra," I said, my voice quiet. "Reading?" She pushed off the shelf and sauntered toward me, circling me like a predator sizing up its prey. "Tell me, what's it like, being so fragile, knowing that any one of us could snap your little neck with a flick of the wrist?" Her friend snickered. I stood my ground, my heart pounding. "I have no quarrel with you." "Oh, but you do," she purred, stopping directly in front of me, her face inches from mine. "You have what is mine. You have my position, my future. You stole him from me, you weak, pathetic little thing." "I didn't steal anyone," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "This wasn't my choice." "It never is with your kind, is it?" she hissed. "You humans are like parasites, latching on to your betters." But this bond won't save you. He despises you. Every time he looks at you, he feels nothing but disgust. I feel it from him. He still wants me. The words were a physical blow. I knew she was right, or at least partly right. I felt his resentment every second of every day. But hearing it from her, seeing the triumphant cruelty in her eyes, was a fresh kind of agony. A hot, unfamiliar anger surged through me. It was a protective, defensive fire I hadn't known I possessed. "Leave me alone," I said, my voice stronger now. Lyra laughed. "Make me?" She reached out and shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, tripping over a rug and crashing into a heavy wooden table. Books and scrolls clattered to the floor. Pain shot up my arm as I landed on it awkwardly. But it wasn't just pain I felt. As my body hit the table, a strange energy, hot and tingling, burst from me. It was like a static shock, but magnified 1,000 times. The gas lamp on the table flickered violently, its flame leaping and sputtering. The ancient, heavy vase sitting next to it cracked with a sharp sound, a jagged line racing up its ceramic side. We all froze. Lyra and her friends stared, their mouths agape, first at the cracked vase and the wild lamp, then at me. My own breath hitched in my throat. I stared at my hands, at the table, trying to understand what had just happened. It was more than a flicker of light, more than an echo of emotion. It was something physical, something that had come from me. "What was that?" one of Lyra's friends whispered, her bravado gone, replaced by a wary fear. Lyra recovered first, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "It was nothing, a coincidence. The vase was old." But her voice lacked its earlier conviction. She looked at me one last time, a new calculating expression on her face, before turning on her heel. "This isn't over, human." She and her cronies swept out of the library, leaving me alone in the mess. I sat there for a long time, shaking, my mind reeling. What had I done? Was it just a freak accident, or was it something more? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. That evening, just as dusk was settling over the valley, there was a sharp rap on my door. I opened it to find Kyle standing there, his face an impassive mask, but his silver eyes were burning with an intense curiosity. It was the first time he had sought me out voluntarily. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. He didn't wait for an invitation, simply pushed past me into the room. He strode to the center of the chamber, turning to face me. He was an intimidating presence, filling the space with his power. Lyra told me what happened in the library. My stomach dropped. She pushed me. "I'm not interested in your squabbles," he said dismissively. "I'm interested in the vase that cracked without being touched, the lamp that nearly exploded. She said she felt a jolt of energy from you." I wrapped my arms around myself, a familiar defensive posture. "I don't know what happened. I fell." "Don't lie to me," he growled, taking a step closer. His proximity was overwhelming. The bond between us thrummed, and for the first time I felt something from him other than anger. It was a keen, sharp-edged curiosity, a hunter's focus on something new and unexplained. I was in a training session on the far side of the castle, and I felt it too. A spark, through the bond. It came from you. My mind raced. He had felt it. This strange power inside me was somehow connected to our bond, to him. He stopped just a foot away from me, his silver eyes searching my face. "What are you, Elara?" The question was soft, but it held the weight of a royal command. Tears of frustration and fear pricked my eyes. "I don't know." The words were torn from me, a cry of genuine desperation. "I'm just me. I'm nobody. I see things sometimes, little flickers of light. I feel echoes in empty rooms. That's all. I don't know what that was today. It's never happened before. I was angry and she pushed me and it just came out. I was babbling, the words tumbling out in a rush. I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare before the one person I wanted to hide from most. I expected him to sneer, to call me a liar or a freak. Instead, he was silent. He watched me, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. He saw the genuine terror in my eyes, the honesty in my panicked confession. For the first time since I had met him, his gaze held something other than contempt. It held a sliver of grudging belief. "Echoes?" he finally said, his voice losing some of its edge. "Flickers of light?" I nodded, wiping at a stray tear with the back of my hand. Since I was a child, the oracle said it was why she brought me here. She called it a sensitivity. She never said it could do things. He continued to study me, a complex puzzle he was trying to solve. The raw, untamed anger that usually radiated from him had subsided, replaced by a focused intensity that was somehow more unnerving. He was seeing me, truly seeing me, for the first time, not as a human mate he didn't want, but as an enigma that threatened the predictable order of his world. "My father must not know about this," he said at last, his tone decisive. "Not until we understand what it is. He will see it as a threat, another liability." I was taken aback. "We?" He looked away, a muscle feathering in his jaw. "This bond," he said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "It makes you my problem. Your weaknesses are my weaknesses. And your abnormalities," he finished, gesturing vaguely at me, "are my responsibility to contain." It was the furthest thing from a declaration of partnership, but it was more than I had ever gotten from him. It was a reluctant acknowledgement that we were in this together, whether we liked it or not. He was no longer just pushing me away. He was engaging, analyzing, strategizing. The dynamic between us had shifted. The push and pull of our forced connection had just become infinitely more complicated. The animosity was still there, a chasm between us. But now, a fragile, tenuous thread of shared secrecy was attempting to span the gap. And I didn't know whether that was more or less dangerous than the open hatred that had come before. Cale's reluctant truce transformed our interactions. The cold avoidance was replaced by a tense, watchful proximity. He began a subtle, secretive investigation into my past and the nature of my strange abilities. He would summon me to the library under the guise of etiquette lessons, but instead of quizzing me on pack law, he would push ancient, dust-choked texts in front of me, texts that spoke of forgotten magics and beings from a time before the packs were formed. We learned of whispers, fragments of stories about a bloodline of shifters who did not shift. They were called nulls in some texts, amplifiers in others. They were beings who possessed a unique magical core that could interact with the raw power of shifters. Some could dampen a shifter's abilities, rendering an alpha as weak as an omega. Others could magnify them, turning a regular warrior into a champion. They were said to be empathic, able to feel the emotional state of the packs, and, in rare cases, to manipulate the physical world through sheer emotional force. The legend said they were all hunted down and exterminated centuries ago by fearful alphas who saw their power as an unnatural threat. "This sounds like you," Cale murmured one afternoon, his finger tracing a faded illustration of a woman with light emanating from her hands. His shoulder was almost touching mine as we bent over the large book. My skin tingled at the closeness. It was a strange intimacy, born not of affection, but of a shared, dangerous purpose. "But I'm not a shifter," I whispered. "I'm human." "Are you?" he countered, his silver eyes meeting mine. You were found as an infant on the edge of the shifter territories. No note, no trace of your parents. You feel our emotions. You can manifest physical energy. Perhaps you are the last of them, a descendant whose wolf nature has been suppressed, leaving only the other part. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. For my entire life, I had been defined by what I lacked. No family, no pack, no wolf. The thought that I might be something else entirely, something rare and powerful, was a seed of hope in the barren soil of my existence. Our forced collaboration changed the tenor of the bond. I still felt his baseline frustration, but now it was mingled with other things. I felt his fierce intelligence as he pieced together clues, his protective instincts not just for his pack, but now, begrudgingly, for our secret. And sometimes, late at night when the castle was quiet, I would feel a deep well of loneliness inside him, a solitude that mirrored my own. The Alpha Prince was a man apart, isolated by his power and his destiny. It was a startling, humanizing revelation. Conversely, he seemed to be growing more accustomed to the echoes of my emotions. He never mentioned it, but I would catch him looking at me with a strange expression when I was feeling particularly lost or sad. Once, after a particularly cruel encounter with Lyra in the dining hall, he found me in the gardens. He didn't say a word, just handed me a perfect white moon petal blossom, before turning and walking away. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture of, not kindness perhaps, but acknowledgement. The fragile peace was shattered on the night of the blood moon. An alarm bell tolled through the castle, a frantic, clanging cry of invasion. Shouts and the sounds of fighting erupted from the outer courtyards. Royal guards rushed past me in the corridors, their faces grim. "What's happening?" I asked one of them, my voice trembling. "Shadow Claws," he grunted, not breaking his stride. "A surprise attack on the northern border patrol." A cold dread washed over me. Kale, he was leading that patrol. I had heard him discussing the route with his beta earlier in the day. I didn't think. I ran. I pushed through the chaos of the palace, following the instinct that was screaming in my mind. The bond, which had been a low hum, was now a shrieking siren of pain and rage. His pain, his rage. It was so intense I could barely breathe. It was 1,000 times worse than the emotional echoes I had become used to. This was raw, physical agony, a phantom fire racing through my own veins. I found the infirmary. It was a scene of controlled chaos. Healers rushed about, the scent of blood and medicinal herbs thick in the air. And there, on a cot in the center of the room, was Kale. His chest was bare, covered in deep, vicious claw marks that were weeping blood. A jagged gash ran down his arm, and his face was pale with pain and blood loss. His father, the king, stood over him, his face a thunderous mask. "It's the poison," a healer said, her voice strained. "Their alpha, Silas, must have coated his claws. It's inhibiting his healing factor." I pushed my way to his side. "Kale," I whispered. He opened his eyes, and they were glazed with pain. But when they focused on me, a spark of recognition, of connection, ignited in their depths. The bond between us flared, a desperate lifeline. I could feel his life force wavering, the poison a cold sludge fighting against the fire of his wolf. Without thinking, without any conscious knowledge of what I was doing, I reached out and placed my hands on his chest, directly over the deepest wounds. An instinct I didn't know I possessed took over. I closed my eyes and focused on him, on the feeling of his life flickering, and I pushed. It was like opening a floodgate. The energy that had cracked a vase now surged from me, a torrent of warm, golden light that flowed from my palms into his body. It wasn't wild and chaotic like before. It was focused, purposeful. I felt the poison in him, a cold and spidery presence, and my energy attacked it, dissolving it like light dissolves shadow. I felt his wolf's natural healing ability, dormant and struggling, and my power amplified it, kickstarting it, fueling it into a roaring inferno of regeneration. Under my hands, the flesh began to knit together. The bleeding stopped. Color flooded back into his face. The entire room had fallen silent, watching in stunned disbelief. I could hear their collective gasp, a sound of wonder and fear. I kept my hands there until I felt the poison was gone, until the steady, powerful thrum of his life force returned to normal through the bond. When I finally pulled my hands away, I swayed, dizzy and drained. The effort had taken nearly everything from me. Kale sat up, taking a deep, clean breath. He looked down at his chest. The wounds that had been life-threatening moments before were now nothing more than thin, red lines, already fading. He looked at me, his silver eyes wide with an emotion I had never seen in them before. Awe. But the moment was shattered by a voice from the doorway. So, the little human has tricks. It was Lyra. Her face was pale, but her eyes were burning with a venomous, desperate fire. She had seen her future with Kale restored in his moment of injury, and I had just snatched it away again. She stalked into the room, her gaze fixed on me. You all see a miracle? I see a monster, a parasite who has hidden her true nature. Lyra, that is enough, King Theron warned, his voice low and dangerous. Is it? She shot back, her voice rising with hysteria. Or is it not enough? You all wonder where she came from. You wonder what she is. I did more than wonder. I did some digging. She was looking at the king now, a cruel, triumphant smile on her lips. I have contacts in the human world. Old records are hard to find, but not impossible, especially when you know what you're looking for. A story about a shifter couple who tried to live disguised as humans, killed by rogues on the edge of our territory 20 years ago. My blood ran cold. My parents. Their bodies were never recovered, Lyra continued, her voice ringing with malicious glee. But there was a baby girl who survived, a baby girl the Oracle spirited away into the human world. She turned her venomous gaze back to me. Her parents weren't killed by rogues, little orphan. That was just the official story. They were executed. Executed for being abominations, nulls who refused to bow to pack law. Her final words were directed at the king, a dagger aimed at his heart. Executed on the order of the one man who feared their power more than anything. On the order of King Theron himself. The world tilted on its axis. Every sound in the room faded to a dull roar in my ears. The king, my parents, executed. The man who had been my reluctant protector was the man who had murdered my family. My eyes flew to Kale. His face was a mask of shock and horror. He looked from Lyra to his father, searching for a denial, a refutation of the monstrous accusation. King Theron's face had gone ashen. His silence was a confession. It was the ultimate betrayal, a truth so monstrous it fractured the very foundation of my reality. The bond between us, which had just been a conduit for a miracle, now transmitted a new wave of emotion from Kale, a sickening wave of revulsion and conflicted agony as he stared at his father, the murderer, and then at me, the daughter of his victims. The fragile trust we had built, the secret partnership, all of it shattered into a million pieces. The man I was bound to was the son of the man who had orphaned me. The pack I was supposed to help lead was the pack that had destroyed my bloodline. A guttural cry of pure anguish was ripped from my soul. No! And for the second time, I reached for the power inside me, but this time it was not for healing. It was for severing. I clawed at the bond, the metaphysical tie that linked me to him, to this family, to this pack. I poured all my grief, all my rage, all my betrayal into a single, focused intent. I reject you. The magical backlash was instantaneous and catastrophic. It was like trying to rip my own soul in half. A scream of pure agony tore from my lips, but also from Cale's. We both collapsed, him from his cot and me to the floor, caught in a vortex of shredding magic. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was his face, contorted in a pain that mirrored my own, as our cursed destiny tried to tear us apart. The world returned to me in fragments of pain and shadow. I was floating in a gray, listless void, a place devoid of feeling, except for a dull, persistent ache deep in my soul. It was the wound of the fractured bond, a spiritual tearing that left me feeling hollowed, incomplete. For days, I drifted in and out of consciousness in my silent, opulent room. Healers came and went, their faces grim. They offered me potions and salves, but there was no remedy for a wound that wasn't in the flesh. Through the tattered remnants of the bond, I could feel Cale suffering a similar fate. His pain was a faint, distorted echo, a constant reminder of the cataclysm I had unleashed. We had not severed the connection, we had only brutalized it. We were two halves of a whole, ripped apart, but still intrinsically linked, bleeding life and energy into the void between us. The pack felt it too. Lorna, the old elder, sat by my bedside one afternoon, her face etched with worry. "The pack is unsettled," she told me, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. The Alpha's strength is tied to the heart of his pack, and its heart is now broken. The warriors are edgy, the Omegas are fearful. Cale, the prince, is weakened. He tries to hide it, but we can all feel it. The bond between you, even broken as it is, acts as an anchor, and you have thrown that anchor into a storm. Lyra's revelation had sent shockwaves through the pack's leadership. King Theron had not denied the charge. His silence was a confession that had tarnished his reign and thrown his honor into question. He was a king who had built his legacy on strength and order, now exposed as a man who had murdered a family out of fear. The foundation of his authority was crumbling. And into this power vacuum, the Shadow Claws struck. The invasion was not a border skirmish this time. It was a full-scale assault. Silas, their notoriously brutal alpha, had been waiting for a moment of weakness, and we had handed it to him on a silver platter. The war horns blasted at dawn, a terrifying sound that shook me from my stupor. The castle itself seemed to tremble as the first wave of attackers crashed against its walls. The raw, primal fear of the pack surged through the damaged bond, jolting me with enough force to sit up in bed. My own fear was a cold, sick thing, but it was dwarfed by the collective terror of thousands. I was connected to them all, a nerve ending for their collective pain. Meanwhile, Cale was seeking his own answers. He had disappeared from the castle 2 days prior, and no one knew where. But I felt him. I felt his desperate search, his journey into the deep, wild parts of the forest that bordered the territory. He was going to the Oracle. He found her in a cave hidden behind a waterfall, a place of mossy stones and echoing drips. He was gaunt, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes held a new, desperate fire. The arrogance of the prince had been burned away, leaving behind the raw steel of a man on the brink of losing everything. "You knew," he accused her, his voice hoarse. "All this time, you knew who she was, what my father did." The oracle looked at him with her milky, all-seeing eyes. "I knew that destiny had laid a difficult path for you both, a path of pain and sacrifice that was necessary to forge what must come next." "What is that?" Kael demanded. "Ruin? My pack is being slaughtered because of a bond I never wanted and a secret you kept?" "The bond was never the curse, Kael. The secrets were. The pride, the fear," she corrected him gently. "The prophecy was never about a null being born to serve an alpha. It was about a balance being restored. Your strength and her heart. Your wolf and her soul. One cannot be whole without the other. Her power is not meant to be a weapon commanded by another, but a shield that rises from love. Your love for her and hers for you." The oracle's words struck him with the force of a physical blow. Love. It was a word that had never once entered into the equation of their cursed arrangement. He had felt resentment, curiosity, a grudging responsibility, even a flicker of attraction. But love? The concept seemed foreign, impossible. "She rejected me," he whispered, the words tasting of failure. "She tried to break the bond." "She was betrayed," the oracle said. "Her heart was shattered by the man she was bound to, by the family she was tied to. You cannot command her trust, Prince Kael. You cannot demand her forgiveness. You must earn it, not as a prince claiming his prize, but as a man who has found his missing half. You must lay your pride and your crown at her feet and show her your soul. Only then will the balance be restored. Only then will our people have a chance to survive the dawn." As Kael was receiving his revelation, I was making a decision. I could not lie here and waste away while the people around me, innocent people, who had only ever looked at me with suspicion, were dying. My feud was with the king, with the past. It was not with the families huddling in the lower halls, not with the guards fighting and falling on the ramparts. I dressed myself, my body weak and trembling, and made my way out of my chamber. The castle was a war zone. The fighting had breached the main gates. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the sounds of snarling wolves and clashing steel. I found my way to the great hall, which had been turned into a makeshift infirmary and sanctuary for the pack's children and elderly. Lyra was there, not sneering or taunting, but fighting. She was in her magnificent red wolf form, standing guard over a group of terrified children, her fur matted with blood, her teeth bared in a snarl as she fended off two hulking Shadowclaw warriors. She fought with the desperate courage of a true protector, and in that moment I saw past the jealous rival to the warrior who loved her pack. I had to get out. I didn't know where I was going, only that I could not stay. I was a poison in the heart of this pack. My very presence was a source of weakness and division. My only logical choice was to flee, to disappear back into the human world and hope that my absence would somehow mend the damage. I made it to a small hidden postern gate in the castle's rear wall, a gate that led directly into the forest. Freedom was just a few feet away. Elara. His voice stopped me cold. I turned. Kel was standing there, silhouetted by the chaos of the burning castle behind him. He had returned. He looked different. The weight of his impending failure had settled on him, yet his eyes held a new clarity, a new purpose. "Don't go," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I have to," I choked out, tears streaming down my face. "I'm the cause of all this. My being here, it's destroying you all." "No," he said, taking a step toward me. "My pride destroyed us. My father's secrets destroyed us. Our fear destroyed us. You were the one who could have saved us, and I was too blind to see it." He stopped before me, his face bare with a vulnerability that stunned me into silence. "I have been a fool, Ilara. I saw you as a burden, a weakness, a human. I was wrong. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You survived a world that didn't want you. You faced a pack that resented you. And you healed me when I was dying, even though I had given you nothing but cruelty." He reached out, not to touch me, but as a plea. "The oracle told me the truth about the prophecy, about us. It's not about power, Ilara. It's about balance, about love." He swallowed hard, the next words costing him everything. "I know I have no right to ask it. I know what my family did to yours, and I will spend the rest of my life atoning for my father's sins. I will give up my title, my claim to the throne, everything, if that is what it takes. But I am begging you, don't leave me. Our pack needs you. I need you." His confession, his utter surrender of pride, was the most powerful thing I had ever witnessed. He wasn't the Alpha Prince demanding obedience. He was just Kale, a man laid bare, offering me his shattered heart and asking for a chance to help him put the pieces back together. Through the broken bond, I felt the truth of his words. It was a pure, unwavering wave of sincerity, regret, and a burgeoning, terrifying emotion that felt like love. The roar of the Shadowclaw Alpha, Silas, echoed from the courtyard, followed by the screams of Kale's warriors. They were breaking through the final line of defense. We were out of time. I looked into Kale's silver eyes, eyes that had once held only contempt, but now held a desperate hope. The Oracle's warning had been about loving a shifter, about the fires of their world. But maybe she wasn't warning me away from it. Maybe she was preparing me to walk through it. I made my choice. "Okay," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. I reached out and laid my hand on his chest, right over his heart. "Okay, Kale." The moment my skin touched his, the fractured bond ignited. It didn't just repair itself, it reforged itself in the fire of our shared decision, coming back 100 times stronger, a brilliant, blinding connection of power and soul. I gasped as his strength flowed into me, and my own energy flowed into him. We were no longer two separate beings. We were one. We turned together and walked back into the heart of the battle, not as a prince and his human weakness, but as a united force ready to claim our destiny. The courtyard was a maelstrom of violence and desperation. The last of the royal guard, led by a wounded but still fighting King Theron, had formed a circle, protecting the entrance to the great hall where the non-combatants were sheltered. At the center of the Shadowclaw onslaught was Silas, a monster of a man, even in his human form. He was larger than Theron, his face a mask of scars and brutal ambition, his eyes burning with a lust for power. He saw us the moment we entered the courtyard. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the sight of us, walking side by side, a visible aura of golden light now shimmering around me. "The Null," Silas grinned, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "I knew you were the prize. Give her to me, Kale, and I might let the rest of your pathetic pack live as my slaves." Kale didn't answer with words. He answered with a roar that was more wolf than man, and then he shifted. It was the first time I had seen it up close. It was a magnificent, violent explosion of power, bones cracking and reforming, his body transforming into that of a massive wolf with fur the color of moonlight and eyes of molten silver. He was breathtakingly beautiful, a creature of myth and power. He launched himself at Silas, a silver blur of claws and fury. The remaining royal guard, bolstered by the sight of their prince's full power, renewed their efforts, clashing with the Shadow Claws with ferocious intensity. But I was not a bystander. I was the other half of the equation. I walked calmly into the center of the fray, the chaos seeming to slow down around me. I could feel every fighter, every ally, every enemy. I felt the strength of the Silvermoon warriors flagging and failing. I felt the life force of my pack. I closed my eyes and reached for my power, but this time I didn't push it at a single person. I opened myself up to the pack, to our bond. I became a conduit. I drew on the collective strength of every Silvermoon shifter, from the strongest warrior to the smallest child hiding in the hall. Their fear, their love for their home, their will to survive. I gathered it all. And then I released it. A wave of golden energy erupted from me, not as a destructive force, but as a wave of pure power and reinforcement. It washed over the Silvermoon warriors. I felt their strength surge, their wounds begin to close, their exhaustion replaced by a wave of vibrant energy. I amplified them. I focused a portion of my power on Kyle. His already formidable strength doubled, then tripled. He moved with a speed and ferocity that was supernatural even for a shifter. He was a whirlwind of destruction, tearing through the Shadow Claw ranks, his every move aimed at getting to Silas. Silas, for his part, was stunned. He saw his warriors, who had been on the verge of victory, suddenly being thrown back. He saw Kyle, radiating a power no alpha should possess, and he saw me, the calm eye of the storm, the source of it all. His greed overcame his caution. He shoved one of his own men into Kyle's path and charged, not at the wolf, but at me. "You are mine," he roared. He never reached me. Kyle, empowered by our bond, intercepted him in a massive collision. The two alphas tumbled, a snarling, biting cyclone of black and silver fur. But the fight was no longer even. Kale was more than just an alpha now. He was half of a whole, fueled by a power Silas could not comprehend. While Kale fought the physical battle, I fought the metaphysical one. I focused on Silas, on his connection to his own pack. He drew strength from their loyalty, their fear of him. I reached out with my own empathic power, and I soothed. I didn't attack his pack members. I sent them waves of peace, of calm. I showed them a vision of a future without a brutal tyrant leading them, a future without constant war. The anger and bloodlust that fueled their connection to Silas began to waver, to falter. Silas felt it. He felt his power base crumbling, the energy he drew from his pack drying up. He faltered, his lunge slowing for a fraction of a second. It was the only opening Kale needed. With a final mighty roar, he overpowered the Shadow Claw Alpha, his jaws closing on Silas's throat in a decisive, final move. A collective gasp went through the Shadow Claw warriors as their alpha fell, their connection to him severed completely. They looked at Kale, who stood over their fallen leader, magnificent and terrible in his power. They looked at me, a strange woman bathed in a soft golden light. The fight was gone from them. They dropped their weapons, submitting. The battle was over. In the aftermath, a hush fell over the blood-soaked courtyard. The surviving Silvermoon warriors looked at Kale and then at me with a new expression in their eyes. It wasn't suspicion or resentment anymore. It was awe. It was reverence. Kale shifted back, his human form covered in blood and grime. But his eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a love so profound it took my breath away. He walked to me, ignoring everyone else, and gently cupped my face in his hands. "You saved us," he whispered. "You saved me." "We saved them," I corrected him softly, placing my hand over his on my cheek. From the steps of the great hall, King Theron watched us. He looked old, broken by the battle and the weight of his sins. He met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw a universe of regret. Then, in front of his entire pack, he slowly, deliberately went down on one knee, bowing his head to me. It was an admission of guilt, an act of surrender, and an acknowledgement of my new place. I was no longer the human orphan. I had claimed my power, my mate, and my destiny. I was the heart of the pack. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and profound change. King Theron formally abdicated, handing the mantle of Alpha to Kyle. His last act as king was a public confession of his crimes, not just against my parents, but against any others he had wronged out of fear. He then chose a life of quiet exile, living as a simple elder in a remote part of the territory, seeking a quiet atonement. Lyra, having fought bravely to defend the pack, came to me and offered a sincere, if stiff, apology. She acknowledged my power and my place, and in time she became the fierce and loyal head of our royal guard. The surviving Shadowclaws, freed from Silas's tyranny, swore allegiance to Kyle, doubling the size and strength of our pack under a new banner of unity. But the most significant change was between Kyle and me. The bond, once a source of pain and resentment, was now a constant, beautiful symphony of shared thoughts, emotions, and strength. We were rarely apart, and even when we were always connected. Learning to navigate that deep intimacy was a journey in itself. I learned the fierce, wild joy of his wolf as he ran through the forest, and he learned to understand the quiet, subtle world of my empathic senses. Our rule was different from Theron's. Kyle's strength was tempered by my compassion. His alpha commands were guided by my ability to feel the needs and fears of the pack. We led not through fear or dominance, but through balance and understanding. We were two halves of a perfect whole, and our pack flourished under our joint leadership. Tonight, the moon is full and hangs like a silver lantern in the ink-black sky. I am standing on the balcony of our chambers, the same balcony where I once stood feeling like a prisoner in a gilded cage. Now, it feels like home. The cool night air whispers against my skin. I am not alone. A massive silver wolf pads silently up beside me and rests his great head on the balcony railing. I reach out and bury my hand in the thick, soft fur of his neck, leaning against his warmth. I can feel the steady, calm beat of his heart through our bond, a rhythm that matches my own. He turns his head and nudges my hand with his nose, his silver eyes glowing with a fierce, unwavering love. I don't need words to know what he is feeling. I feel his contentment, his peace, his absolute devotion. And he feels mine in return. The Oracle had warned me never to love a shifter, that their world would devour me and their passion would burn me to ash. She was right about the fire, but she was wrong about the outcome. I had walked through the flames of their world, and I had not been burned. I had been forged. I had found my power, my purpose, and my other half. I had not been devoured. I had become the heart of the pack, bound for all eternity to the Alpha Prince who was and always would be my destiny.